The Orange Zone, sponsored by Apex Entertainment.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into an Orange Zone instant recap. That's Ashley Wenskski. I'm Samantha Croston. We are joining you after Syracuse beat UConn in overtime in the home opener. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the Orange Zone YouTube channel. This podcast is sponsored by Apex Entertainment. Wow, this was a back and forth game. It was probably around 54 minutes of bad football and 6 minutes of good football. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Scary hours today in the season opener at the Dome. Syracuse pulls it out. You said it, 27-20. Here's a stat for you, just to lead things off. Syracuse led for 48 seconds of regulation. They led the game for 48 seconds.
And sometimes that's all you need. We're going to go through it sort of quarter by quarter and then give you guys a couple of our takeaways from this game. Syracuse gets their first win, but my God, did they have a slow start. UConn gets the first touchdown of the game. It is off of a trick play. It works beautifully. Syracuse answers with a field goal by Trip Woody. Again, same thing. UConn gets the second touchdown in the second quarter. They go up 14-3 on a Mel Brown 45-yard run. What did the Dome feel like at that point?
Yeah, I would say, as the first quarter went on, as the second quarter went on, and UConn puts up 2 scores, then Syracuse, obviously, to that point, only had a field goal. The life was certainly getting sucked out of the Dome. I think that's the obvious answer. But the other thing is, as you saw Angeli start to go, I guess, kind of stagnant on offense, right? Then Syracuse is throwing out the offense, and it's either a 3 and out many times, or, Angeli converts once and then is unable to really get past midfield. As that continued to happen, I think fans were getting more and more apprehensive about the Syracuse offense, right? It's a little bit of a funny thing because we come in after the game last week, we're so worried about the defense giving up 45 points to Tennessee. Okay, they put up 26 points against Tennessee. That's a good defense. You were encouraged by the things you saw in week 1. Today was certainly the other end of that scope.
Yeah, I agree. Syracuse again answers that with a field goal. It's 14-6, and then out of the break, UConn storms down the field again. They're only able to get off a field goal, but it's 17-6. Time is winding down here. All I can tell you is what I saw from Syracuse Twitter. Ashley was at the game today filming it. I was here sports anchoring. People are saying, to your point, is it time for us to put Ricky Collins out there? And just so you guys know, one of the things that was mentioned in the Fran Brown press conference, I think Fran Brown said something along the lines of, I've been loyal to my wife for 30-something years. I take that to mean we will be seeing more of Steve Angeli.
Quote, I am married to Steve.
Right. Like,
so,
truly.
He's married to Steve. Yeah, the fans in the stands around me multiple chants, not just one. At that point in the third quarter when they had not scored a touchdown, and their 2 scoring chances were 2 field goals were, we want Ricky, we want Collins, the whole 9 yards. Collins did not make an appearance.
No, he did not. And I think there is a reason for that. And hey, in this particular instance, it worked. Fourth quarter is really where it gets exciting. Truly the end of the fourth quarter. Specifically, 5 minutes and 41 seconds left in this game. Syracuse finally gets that touchdown. It was Justice Ross Simmons. It was a 53-yard pass. I mean, we didn't see a lot of it, but it was a nice drive. It was.
But also, right preceding that drive, I believe, is when Angeli threw an interception to UConn. And I think it was maybe 7 minutes left. And then the defense actually was holding strong. I believe got a 3-and-out, gave him the ball back. Can I just tell you, when Steve Angeli threw that interception in the fourth quarter, it was all over in my mind. Pack your bags. We'll see you next week.
Yep. And I totally understand why you feel that way, especially because it felt like it was so hard for them to get any points at all, that who knew something like this would happen. In a way, I do think it shows something about Fran Brown. You always, fans are the first ones, I think, to be like, we want to see something different. And I get wanting that change. But at this point, it sort of felt like you had to let Steve Angeli either succeed or fail here. I'm not sure that he necessarily succeeded or failed, but a win is a win. And they ultimately did come out on top.
He kept his head above water.
That's right. Beyond that, then there's 48 seconds left. And again, Syracuse has another opportunity. And Yasin Willis, little 3-yard run for the tutty. And ultimately, they went for the 2-point conversion again. So that was the first time, like you said, in the entire game that they led. Syracuse has a 20-17 lead. I will say this, with 48 seconds left, up 20-17, you could make the argument that that could have potentially should have been the end too.
There was that fourth quarter. So when it was 17-12, I believe, because Syracuse went for 2 and did not get it prior to that in the game. When it was 17-12 in the fourth quarter, that offensive drive, Angeli came out firing. You knew they were going to score, right? First downs all the way down the field. I believe Ross Simmons had a catch. I believe Dan Villari had a catch somewhere in there. Maybe Gill. I don't know. He was firing on all cylinders. You knew they were going to score, right? So they score. Everybody's excited. Okay, they go for 2. Going for 2 there, I should add, was so critical because that means they had to get the 2-point conversion there. If they didn't, a field goal would have won the game or an ensuing touchdown, right? UConn drives down the field, does have to settle for the field goal and ties it 20-all, and we are headed to overtime. You could certainly make the argument that the defense was not the problem today, but as you said beforehand, 48 seconds and the defense has to lock down 48 seconds and they can't do it is not exactly a master class.
I agree. We get into overtime. Syracuse comes out. They have the ball first. And again, it's Justice Ross Simmons. I do think that it is continuously important for us to point out some of the bright spots on Syracuse's offense. And it's not really Steve Angeli, at least so far. But Justice Ross Simmons and Dan Villari, great games.
I was going to say, we finally saw, well, I don't know if I'd call it the breakout game. We knew that he was good from last year, but he came back from the injury. Ross Simmons, Dan Villari looked like the Dan Villari of old. And honestly, a Syracuse team that's really looking for an impactful player in that tight end spot in the absence of Verande Gadsden, an impactful player, catching passes in the slot in the absence of Trevor Pena. Villari did a little bit of both of those things today. He really looked like himself of, 2 years ago. And I think that if he can be a legitimate target for Steve Angeli, that's going to help Angeli, right? They were even talking in the postgame about how they feel like they have a pretty good connection. Dan Villari stepping up on this team, I think, is going to be important to this offense.
There's not one doubt about it. That's something we've talked about in weeks past, but this is not an offense led by just the quarterback like it was under Kyle McCord. This is different than that, and it's going to have to be a full team effort. Now, was Fran Brown happy with the performance of his team? That answer is a resounding no. How do we know that? Because right immediately after the game, Fran Brown actually had his team on the line running sprints. I'm not here to tell you that that's never happened, and I'm not here to tell you that I've never seen it in a movie. But I am here to tell you that in real life, directly after a game, knowing that there's a chance that it could risk injury, I haven't seen it much.
Yeah, I was standing right next to said sprints. Although calling them sprints, I would like to say, is a little. I mean, we were jogging. We just played overtime, right? We played 4 quarters and then pretty much another half of a quarter of a football game. So we were tired. There was some limps. There were some jogs. But I was standing right there because I just finished filming when they go sing by the alma mater after a win, and for a minute, I was like, what are they doing? I was like, is this some sort of new cool down routine? And then I finally realized that it was because Fran was pissed and they were running sprints. And I was like, yep, that'll add up. It wasn't like, I don't want anyone to it wasn't like it was like hardcore punishment. I mean, Fran was out there in the middle of it, but guys were certainly taking their time completing it. I guess it's a good show of faith, right? It's a good show of character that he said after the game when Fran was asked about it on ACC Network Extra that the game was on. He said that he expanded on it, but he also said to us in the post game that we were in, the local post game, that they were doing that win, lose, or draw. He said, I just didn't like the way that we played today. So we were going to do that if we lost, if we won. Obviously, they did win. We were going to sprint.
He said, if anyone is curious as far as why did this happen, he said, guys not running to get lined up, guys not running to the ball. I just want to celebrate the win with the people, but I'm so pissed. I'm mad as heck right now. He continued, I was taught through a lot of coaches that coached me, you either coach it or allow it. So I feel that I'm allowing it. There's just some things I got to do. I just want to hold them to the standard of who they are. He thinks they're excellent men, so I agree with you. I don't think this was necessarily like running them into the ground, figuratively or literally, but there is a certain standard that he likes to uphold, and I actually think it had very little to do with the win or the loss. Like you said, it's a character thing here.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Details.
I agree. It's the details. And honestly, for as much as we're saying a win's a win, and it is, right? It's going to go down, and in November, Syracuse beat UConn. That's going to be how it is in the scorebook. However, I mean, if you're an SU fan watching that game, I know you're not particularly encouraged by what you saw, right? UConn is not a team, no matter how. Listen, I know they were 9-4 last year. I know Jim Mora is their coach. I know that they have had an upswing under his tenure as of late. But that's not a game if you're Syracuse, especially considering with who else you have to play this year, who remains, that you want to see this team in a spot like they were in the fourth quarter. I mean, the bottom line is the bottom line, and the bottom line is that they could not figure out how to score a touchdown until there was minutes left in the game.
That's right. And against a team like UConn, maybe, just maybe, you're able to sneak away with a win. But against Clemson, like, forget about it, man. Come on. And I understand, listen, the tough schedule is good for a lot of reasons, and it is good to compete. And clearly, John Wildhack and Fran Brown and all of the decision makers at Syracuse truly do believe and want Syracuse to be one of those college football playoff style teams. And I do agree that you can't become one of those teams unless you're playing those teams. However, Syracuse is not close to being that team right now. So that's kind of the issue, I think. I'm not saying, like, I'm not here to blame it on the scheduling per se, but it wouldn't have hurt if they had one or two, not even, I'm not saying easily winnable, but like middle of the road games or something, at least like in the beginning of the schedule, because damn, it just feels like there's going to be a lot more lessons learned than success down the stretch.
I mean, next week is your only one, right? Colgate is the only game on the schedule that you look at and go, yeah, that's pretty much a get-right game, right? But after what we saw today, can you call anything a get-right game? You played Colgate, and you were on the ropes for
UConn.
UConn, I'm sorry. You played UConn, and you were on the ropes for 85% of the game. You know what I mean? So there's definitely some things that are going to have to be worked out. I mean, we talked so much about the defense last week. I think the defense was cleaned up today. It certainly was far from perfect. That last drive of the game of regulation spotlighted. But offensively, you know, for all we talked about last week of, okay, Jeff Nixon's offense, and they'll at least be able to keep this team afloat. I mean, I don't know if you were encouraged by what you saw today, right? You saw a really struggling Steve Angeli. You saw Steve Angeli that was really struggling, but was also pressured by UConn. UConn had 3 sacks today, 6 pass breakups. There were a bunch of passes. Angeli threw an interception that I mentioned, but there were beyond that one interception that a guy did catch. There were 6 other pass breakups that you were like, oh my God, like almost an interception. You know what I mean? So I think when you look at that stuff from Angeli, I think when you look at the ball security, the pocket presence, the command of the game, you're worried about that. At least I am, right? Like, it's nice that he led them to the win and he figured it out. I definitely think so. It's nice that it goes down as a win. But I think the overall bulk of the performance puts Angeli more in the concern category than it does in the encouraged category.
I completely agree, and I have to be honest about the fact that I was among those people who in the second quarter and in the third quarter were thinking, why haven't we seen Collins at least get a snap yet? And I don't think it's the last time I'm going to think that. Mind you, no one is sitting here saying that Collins is for sure going to be better or worse. But just knowing that you have him there on the bench, something about it kind of irks me. And it's fine today because they won, and it will be fine next week because they will win. But then against Clemson, don't count out the fact that just because Fran Brown said what he said today and used his wife as an analogy, that we will not be seeing Ricky Collins. Because if that was really true...
Will we be seeing a breakup?
If that was really true, and he was that big on loyalty, then why would he have named Ricky Collins the starter to begin with and then take it back?
And I just think, I mean, I was in the camp, definitely in that third quarter, that it was time to see Collins. Because at that point, what do you have to lose, right? Angeli's not moving well. He's not throwing well. He's not really doing much of anything well. And it's been 3 full quarters of that. Let's see somebody else. Now, that didn't happen. I guess, you know, there is something to be said for Fran Brown having faith in Angeli and Angeli coming through, absolutely, and like showing the composure even in those spots. But when you have Collins sitting there, you do just wonder, right? You just wonder in a game where Angeli's struggling that bad against UConn, would you be hurting yourself to see the other option? I guess I appreciate Fran Brown's loyalty. Then you get to a point there where there's like 5 minutes left. That's not even fair to put Collins in. Like, that's just, I mean, you should not be throwing Ricky Collins into that situation either, right? So we're saying the offense had a tougher day. They still had 461 total yards. Somehow Angeli finished with 417 passing yards, 33 of 55, or 33 of 53. I think he was just, that's just called quality over quantity, right? Like quantity over quality, I should say. Like he was just accumulating stuff at the end there because he had to throw so much. So you saw him figure it out. But I guess apprehensive would be the word after this game, because if that's how you looked against UConn, teams like Clemson and Notre Dame and SMU certainly aren't going to let you get away with that. I did think it was interesting after the game that Brown was so staunchly loyal of Angeli, and not only that, he actually said that Angeli calmed him down a few times. Like, Brown was starting to freak out, and this is what I'm doing for TV later. Like, Angeli was the one that was like, hey, coach, it's fine, I got it. And he was like, okay.
Really?
So credit to Angeli there. I mean, he did have it, barely.
And you know what? To say that and to make a promise like that to Fran Brown, I feel like you got to mean it.
Yeah.
So if he meant it, hey, it worked out for today. Final thoughts, and then we'll get out of here.
Final thoughts. Like I said, Colgate at least is a get right game of sorts. Now, granted, they only have 6 days to get right for it because it is next Friday. They were absent of a run game today, too. I think it was a little interesting to see them rely so much less on Yasin Willis because he scored 3 touchdowns against Tennessee. He wasn't really an impactful player today. He did get in there once, but he had like 44 yards or something. They relied on Will Nixon a lot. So I'm interested to see how that ground game kind of shapes out and how that kind of I'm interested if Yasin was kind of like dealing with something lingering injury, anything like that. Also worth a mention injury-wise, Devin Grant did not play in this game. He did not dress. He was not out there at all. So I guess Brown said he was 50-50 beforehand. I guess we'll have to see if he gets out there against Colgate, but he's a guy that's obviously a really, really big part of the defense.
One other thing I will say as my final thought is that when you are going up against a team like Colgate, just remember, for anyone who is interested in this, that their new head coach in his first year is Kurt Fitzpatrick. He just came over from Cortland, and that's a guy who obviously at Cortland had a lot of success. I tend to agree with you. It's my alma mater, so I feel bad saying it, but it should be a get-right game for Syracuse. But clearly with the way that this year has been going, just because it should be doesn't always mean that it is. So they had to prep really well for it. Thank you, everybody, as always, for joining us, and we will see you back here next week.